Hello everyone, I'm Ankit and you're watching StudyIQ English. In our today's video, we'll try to understand the geopolitics of the region that is in news currently, that is the region of Middle East. Now, over the weekend, US and Israel conducted attacks on Iran with an intention to bring regime change in Tehran. And all of this bombing was aimed to do just one thing. They wanted to undo the sequence of events that materialized in the Middle East after the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Now, it was Islamic Revolution of 1979 which introduced a new model of religious politics in the region, which was more radical in nature. And at the same time, it transformed the region's balance of power, much to the dislike of US. And it also disrupted the flow of a key commodity, or the most precious commodity of the region, that is the crude oil. And it also altered the very geometry of great power politics that happened in the region of Middle East. So to make things simple, I've divided the following video in multiple different sections. In the first section, we'll try to understand what was the geopolitics of Middle East like before the events of 1979, how US, for that matter, created a regional architecture which consisted of three important powers in the region. And then after the events of 1979, what kind of consequences it brought. It brought economic and political consequences. We'll understand this in the third part. And in the fourth part, we'll try to understand the attempts made by important stakeholders in the region in order to get prominence. And we'll conclude our today's video by understanding what might be the future possible scenarios that will be the result of the ongoing conflict that is ongoing in the region of Middle East. Now, the notes which I will be using in our today's session, in case if you want to download them, you can go to a particular Telegram channel called as ATS Live. And while you're at it, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel also. So to understand things better, we'll have to go back in a time a bit, and we'll start off from 1956 when Suez crisis materialized. As you can understand, Suez Canal is a man-made canal which is located in Egypt, which was controlled and constructed by the Britishers. Suez Canal connects Red Sea in the east with Mediterranean Sea in the west. Now, as you can understand, when Suez Canal was nationalized by Egypt, which at that time was under the control of Abdul Nasser, it naturally created a negative impact on Britishers and other neo-colonial powers. So Britishers, France and Israel, they launched a military response in order to regain their control of the Suez Canal back. Now, much to your surprise, it was US who pressured its own allies or these neo-colonial powers to withdraw from this war. And the intention of US was to prevent Soviet Union from gaining a major say in things which was going on in the geopolitics of the region. Now, what changed because of this 1956 Suez crisis? From 1956 Suez crisis, we saw the end of French and British primacy in the region, and it was US who filled this geopolitical vacuum by emerging as the dominant external power in the region. At the same time, the Arab nationalism resurged because of the events that transpired in the Suez War, and it also led to the most precious commodity of the region, oil, becoming the commodity where superpower rivalry, that is the rivalry between the United States and the rivalry between the Soviet Union, this became the virtue of the rivalry of the great politics. Now, how the scheme of things in 1956 increase the role of Washington in the region, let us understand this. Now, what was the geopolitical priority of America in 1956? America wanted to protect the most precious flow of the commodity of the region, that was crude oil. And for that, America ensured that the conservative monarchies of the region at that time, that was Iran and Saudi Arabia, became the stability anchors of the region. At the same time, US also wanted to manage the relationship between the Arab, who were getting more rationalized and were threatening its another ally in the region, that was Israel. So US wanted to manage and reduce the Arab-Israel tension, and at the same time, it wanted to contain the Soviet influence in the region in order to stay as the most dominant player in the Middle East. So by 1970s, in order to ensure its primacy in the region, America entrenched itself in the security relationships and ensured dominance of three major pillars. That was Saudi Arabia, Iran, which at that time was monarchy and very pro-America in nature, and Israel as the backbone of its regional architecture. Or understood? So in 1970s, US primarily relied on these three countries in order to fulfill its geopolitical objectives in the Middle Eastern region. Now let us understand the various aspects of this strategy by the US. First strategy is known as twin pillar strategy, and in this twin pillar strategy, US formally relied on two countries, that was Iran, which at that time was under the rule of Pahlavi dynasty. It was a monarchy, and at the same time it was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which was under the leadership of monarchs like King Faisal. Now, why US relied on other countries rather than providing itself as a major important player in the region? So why did not US intervene directly? This is a big question. First of all, you have to understand, when Britain withdrew from the region, just created a geopolitical vacuum. And in order to fill that directly, it would have imposed direct American military involvement. Now, direct military involvement of America anywhere across the globe is politically very costly and controversial since the sequence of Vietnam War. So as a result, US wanted to share the burden of the regions with its regional allies, and here the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Kingdom of Iran played a very important role, and this is called as a twin pillar strategy. Now, in this twin pillar strategy, the America or Washington, it ensured that Saudi Arabia became the financial stabilizer of the region by undertaking more oil production and refinement. And other important oil producer of the region, Iran, it became heavily armed. Now, on one hand, both of these countries were rival in nature, but they did not let their rivalry to exacerbate, because both of them dependent on the oil security independence that was done by the US. So they remained rival, but they did not get into conflict, because ultimately both of them wanted to earn so much money because of the production and refinement of oil. Now, this twin pillar strategy of US was designed very carefully. They wanted to depend on both these kingdoms individually. Saudi became the financial stabilizer, and Iran, it became the Gulf's military enforcer. So this intention of the United States was to prevent any single regional actor from becoming dominant and threatening the primacy of US in the region. So US in that way dependent on other countries, but it did not let one of these countries to become overwhelming in the region. Similarly, at this time, the third important pillar of the US, that was Israel, was enmeshed in a 1967 war with other Arab nationalist countries. In 1967, 6 days war started. On one hand, it was Israel, and on another hand, there were nationalist Gulf countries, or Arab countries for that matter, like Egypt, like Lebanon and Jordan. Now, to deal with this problem, US ensured that it strengthened Israel's military so that any future threat to Israel might be dealt by Israel themselves. But in order to prevent these Arab states who were anti-Israel in nature from getting fully with the Soviets' orbit, US ensured that they were provided financial benefits by using economic diplomacy, and it also ensured that oil and its production ultimately benefited these Arab countries also, like the Egypt. So when Egypt, the power changed from Anwar Sadat, when Anwar Sadat, who was an ex-military officer, became the president of the Egypt, US saw an opportunity. US saw that this is the time when I can ensure ceasefire and bettering of relations between the fighting parties like Jordan, Egypt on one hand and Israel on another. So US ensured that all these countries signed Camp David Accords, and it removed Egypt, who at that time was the largest Arab military, from the Arab-Israel confrontation. So the problems of Iran and Saudi was solved by making themselves interdependent. One was the security provider, another one was money provider. And at the same time, the tensions that was faced by other pillar of the region, that was Israel, it was stabilized by eliminating Egypt as a source of threat to the America's regional architecture by signing all of them the Camp David Accord. So this was the politics that happened in the region in the 1970s. Now things changed rapidly because of the events that happened in 1979. It was the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Now Islamic Revolution of Iran, or before Islamic Revolution, Iran, which was ruled by the Shah Pahlavi dynasty, it remained a stable pro-American pillar. But this stable pro-American pillar changed in 1979, where a unique structure of clerical rule called as theocratic republicanism was created. In theocratic republicanism, the power structure of the country, which was monarchy at that time, changed, and the ultimate power of Iran came to rest with a supreme leader who was also cleric in nature. Now the supreme leader would have full religious and political authority. For that matter, even presently in Iran, it is the supreme leader who controls politics of the country, who is responsible for foreign policy of Iran, and is also responsible for implementing the religious tenets of Shiite Islam with the help of a paramilitary organization called as Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Right now, this Islamic revolution did not just remain confined within the geographical boundaries of Iran. It was also exported to the nearby countries, creating a more radical approach in the region of Middle East. Now, the immediate fallout of this Iranian revolution can be divided into two parts. First is the economic fallout, and second is the political fallout. First, let us cover the economic fallout. Before 1979, when Iran was under the Shah Pahlavi dynasty's rule, Iran was world's second largest OPEC producer, that is of crude oil. So much so that even in 1978, Iran was exporting about 5 to 6 million barrels per day, which in today's number is about 5% of global production. And when revolution started and the resultant strike paralyzed the production, the Iran's output of crude oil, it reduced by 50%. So when supplies of an essential commodity reduces, you can understand the prices of that commodity would rise. And as a result, the prices of crude oil jumped more than 2 times. It was $15 per barrel in 1917 and it reached $39 to $40 per barrel in just 2 years from now, that is 1980. So the immediate economic fallout was reduction in the supplies of crude oil and increase in the prices of crude oil. Now, to deal with this economic fallout, US came up with a plan. US deepened the security guarantees that it provides to countries like Saudi Arabia by establishing military bases, and at the same time, Gulf monarchies and the money that they were making out of crude oil production, US wanted them to invest them in the US financial market, so that tomorrow, in case these countries would want to go to war with US, they won't, because it would lead to erasure of their own investments in America. And at the same time, Western countries led by US started keeping strategic oil reserves, which will ensure that in case of any future disruption, it would not lead to immediate curtailment of supplies in the West. And this crisis, it changed the way the global energy architecture worked. US, it started to focus more on energy efficiency. This was the time when Japanese automobiles, who were known for their efficient fuel engines, they were introduced in America, and other countries also wanted to expand towards alternatives like nuclear energy. Similarly, they also diversified away from their dependence on Middle Eastern crude oil, and as a result, crude oil from North Sea, that is called as Brent, American crude oil, popularly is called as Western Texas Intermediate, and Mexican production like Olmeca, they all increased in nature. So this changed the global energy production. Another consequence or the fallout of the Iranian revolution is a political fallout, and this is more important as far as our today's discussion is concerned. Now, Tehran, it tried to sustain this permanent revolution, the cause of Iranian revolution, and it tried to expand this to other regions in the Middle East. So much so that it started to champion the Palestinian cause more aggressively than even the Arab states. Now, at that same time, Iran also wanted to position itself as the radical challenger to the US and its allies like Israel in the region. Now, this already was a bad news for America, but as this kind of a revolution which brought a more republican and a more theocratic concept of radical Islam into fore, and it led to mobilization of Shia minorities in the region, this situation alarmed even the conservative Arab rulers. Now, what the conservative Arab rulers tried to deal with this fallout, they tried to accommodate the radical forces in their own home countries and tried to encourage their ideology even abroad. And in this day, the origin of radical Islamism or the origin of Islamic terrorism can be traced back to this sequence of events. Now, this hardlining of the religious politics in the Middle East, just because of the consequence of Iranian revolution, led to weaponization of religious politics. It led to growth of Islamist militancy, so much so that the rise of transnational Islamic networks like that of Al-Qaeda, even more recently as that of ISIS, can be traced back to the sequence of event that was a culmination of the Iranian revolution. Understood? So this was the ultimate political fallout. Now, to deal with this political fallout, Iran on one hand, it tried to evade the expansive economic sanctions that was imposed by US and its allies, but at the same time, even the Arab countries began to isolate Iran. How did Iran navigate with these challenges? We'll discuss this later on in our today's video only. First, let us deal with how Arab countries wanted to isolate Iran. Arab countries now, which was against Israel and its formation, because Israel being a Jewish state and Arab countries being Islamic in nature, they tried to reconcile with Israel. Not so long ago, Abraham Accords was signed, where many Arab countries like the UAE, they formally recognized Israel, which was a culmination of event that started due to Camp David Accord, right? So all of these, that is, the Arab countries mollycoddling with Israel, is a direct consequence that they wanted to isolate Iran. On the other hand, they also brought security cooperation with US more closer, so much so that US has a big military base in Saudi Arabia. It also has the region's largest air base, that is in Al Udeid base in Qatar. All of this is a direct consequence of the Arab countries trying to deal with the fallout of the Islamic Revolution and their attempts to isolate Iran. Now, let us come back to Iran. How did Iran manage American confrontation? That was the result of the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Now, before 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran was one of the Washington's closest ally in Middle East. But as and after Islamic Revolution happened, Iran became an important partner of America's rival in the region, that is Russia and China. So Iran started to get enmeshed more with China and Russia economically, strategically and institutionally. For example, to deal with economic sanctions, Iran became a part of BRICS Plus initiative. It joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So this shows that Iran tried to embed itself in the Eurasian politics in order to limit the Western economic sanctions that crippled Iran economically. Similarly, Iran also tried to deal with the threats that emerged in the Middle East directly by mobilizing Shia communities and their organizations across the regions of Middle East. For example, Hamas, which was a political and radical actor in the region of Gaza, it created or it tackled the challenges that Iran got from Israel. Similarly, Hezbollah, which was in Lebanon, was directed more towards Israel and other similar countries in the region, that is Iraq and Syria. And Houthis, which is located in Yemen, it became a roadblock for region, that is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well as UAE. So this is how, by creating and promoting these Shia organizations in the region, Iran tried to tackle America and its allies in the region. And at the same time, to create pressures on America, Iran even went ahead with its nuclear program. Now, America, for that matter, tried to limit nuclear program of Iran by signing Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which imposed how much enrichment can Iran do, that is 3.6% enrichment, and it also limited the stocks of the enriched uranium with Iran, that is up to 300 kilograms. Now, to pressurize US again, Iran started to enrich more uranium and it tried to keep more stockpile, but we have covered that angle already. Similarly, what will happen now? That is a big question that we have to deal with before we end our today's video. Now, there are three possibilities that can happen after the end of the war. First possibility, the first extreme possibility, is the collapse of the regime, which would mean a pro-Western regime would be established in Iran. Second, again, a radical possibility is that the regime might survive and it might become more hardened, which means it will become more anti-US in its posture. Third is a middle path, that is, it might lead to fragmentation or it might lead to a managed transition. So let us understand all these three scenarios individually. First, let us try to understand the first scenario, that is, what if the regime itself would collapse? Now, this is a possibility. First of all, why? The security architecture or the apparatus that was created after the Iranian Revolution, which was authoritarian in regime, has already collapsed because of the death of important functionaries, be it the supreme leader of Iran, be it the head of IRGC, be it other important stakeholders in the region. So this might create a possibility that due to external intervention, it may weaken the coercive monopoly of the Iranian state and at the same time might allow consolidation of the urban opposition, which is more elite in nature. Now, if this were to happen regionally, it would create a positive impact. First of all, Iran would try to reconcile with the Gulf states like Saudi as well as UAE, and on the other hand, it might become less hostile towards other important player in the region, that is Israel. And at the same time, globally, it would be a very big strategic victory for US, and at the same time, it will be a very big blow on the aim of the rivals of US in the region, that is China and Russia. Now, further, if the sanctions were to be lifted because of a setup of a pro-US regime in the region, this would allow for more flow of crude oil into the international market, gradually cooling off the prices of crude oil. So globally, economically, it will be a good news. Now let us consider what would happen in case the second scenario were to develop. The second scenario means if the external pressure which is due to the US and Israel, it might strengthen the nationalist solidarity, which can happen also. If this nationalist solidarity in Iran would strengthen, this would give Iranian Revolution Guard Corps the opportunity to consolidate the power by mobilizing other loyalists of the regimes. Now, if this were to happen, first of all, they will be able to offset the dissent that has emerged in the internal society of Iran. And on the other hand, Iran would become more securitized. Now, regionally, this would be a bad news. First of all, the proxy war, which is direct consequence of the Iranian revolution, might intensify, and the militarization of the Gulf, not just of Iran, would increase. And energy volatility, which would continue to persist because US won't lift its economic sanctions. Now, this would deepen the regional polarization. So, regionally, it would become a bad news. Now, let us look at the third possibility, which is more likely to happen. And this is because of clerical cohesion. If it weakens due to the external bombardment, and the power might shift towards an hybrid elite, that is urban elite as well as the clerical elite, but the ideology themselves would be softened and the system would remain intact. So, the system would remain intact, but it would get less radical in nature. So, because of this, Iran may gradually prioritize the national interest over the revolutionary cause, and it might also limitly reapproach other important players in the region, including the US. But the ambiguity of this regime would remain. Whether it would be pro-US, whether it would be pro-China, that would remain to be seen. So these are the three possibilities that might happen. What you have to understand, it was the 1979 Islamic Revolution that created or fermented the problems which led to this US war. Because as Iran got more radicalized, it created an opportunity for other countries also to become more radical. And direct consequence of this would be to trace with the rise of Islamic terrorism across the world. At the same time, US, who wants to remain the most prominent player in the region, also relied on a kind of strategy which upended due to the events of 1979 Islamic Revolution. So we have understood everything that you need to know in order to understand the geopolitics of the region that is in Middle East. Now, we'll try to solve a question which has been asked in UPSC exam, but before that, there is a very important announcement. Now, students who are really serious about their UPSC preparation, they can take admissions in the Foundation P2I batches of StudyIQ, which are available both in English, Hindi, as well as in bilingual format. You can take admissions for either 2027 or 2028 batches. But if you take the admissions during Holi, you'd get up to 55% off on all the courses. So this is the best possible time for you guys to take admissions. Please do remember, before making the payment, if you use the code ATS Live, this code, it will help you fetch maximum discounts on all the courses. So do not forget to do that. This is the question that appeared in the 2016 UPSC exam. This is an easy question. You can easily eliminate one of the options from it. And do let me know the correct answers in the comment section. And what do you feel about the geopolitics of the region? Also do let me know in the comment section your opinion. I'm waiting to hear about that. So this is all from my side for today's video. Once again, if you want to download the notes, you can go to this particular Telegram channel. And with this, I will take your permission. Please have a very good day, and we'll see each other again quite soon.